The office was tall and shiny, with glass walls and fancy chairs that squeaked when you sat down. People wore suits, spoke in low voices, and walked quickly like every second mattered. The company was known for its family values, at least that's what it said on the posters in the hall, but behind those polished smiles and big promises, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Most people were too busy to notice the quiet woman who came in early and left late. Her name was Mila. She was in her 50s, soft-spoken, and always wore the same gray uniform. Mila cleaned the floors, wiped the desks, and emptied trash cans without ever bothering anyone. She greeted people with a gentle smile, but they rarely smiled back. To them she was just the cleaner. But they didn't know Mila had a secret, and soon everything would change. Mr. Carter was the kind of manager people whispered about but never to his face. He was young, sharp-looking, and always wore expensive suits that smelled like cologne. He liked to brag about his golf trips with the CEO and post photos of his fancy car on social media. To him, work was more about power than teamwork. He walked around the office like he owned it, talking down to people who didn't fit his idea of important. If someone made a mistake, even a small one, he'd point it out in front of everyone, smirking like it was a joke. Most people didn't laugh, but they didn't speak up either. He was too close to the top. To Mr. Carter, Mila didn't even exist. He never thanked her, never looked her in the eye, never said hello. She was just the help in his mind. But all that changed the day of the big company meeting. For once he noticed Mila, and not in a good way. What he didn't know was that this moment would be the beginning of his downfall. The boardroom was filled with soft chatter as employees took their seats. It was one of the company's biggest meetings of the year. All departments were there. The long table was polished, the lights were bright, and the air smelled like fresh coffee and nerves. Mr. Carter stood at the front, grinning like he was on stage. Just before the meeting started, Mila stepped in quietly with her cart. She didn't say a word. She just went to the corner, wiping down the coffee counter and picking up a few crumpled napkins someone had left behind. Mr. Carter noticed her and frowned, clearly annoyed. "Hey," he called out, loud enough to stop every conversation in the room. "Shouldn't you be doing that after hours or something?" Mila looked up, confused, but didn't respond. He stepped forward and raised his voice. "This is a professional meeting, not a janitor's lounge. You're just the cleaner. Know your place." The room went silent. A few people shifted in their seats. One woman looked down at her notepad. Another man opened his mouth to say something but stayed quiet. Mila stood still for a second. Her face didn't change, but her eyes looked tired. She gave a small nod, turned her cart, and quietly walked out of the room. Mr. Carter chuckled to himself. "Anyway," he said, clapping his hands together, "back to real business." He started the presentation like nothing had happened. The charts appeared on the screen, people took notes, and the room filled with the sound of his voice again. But something had changed. The air didn't feel the same. Some people kept glancing at the door where Mila had walked out. They wouldn't say it out loud, but most of them knew what just happened wasn't right. No one could guess that Mila wasn't done yet, not even close. The meeting dragged on for another half hour, but nobody was really paying attention. Mr. Carter kept talking about profits and goals, but his jokes didn't land like they usually did. People's minds were elsewhere, mostly on Mila, and that uncomfortable moment no one wanted to mention. As Mr. Carter wrapped things up with a proud smile and a long speech about company culture, his phone buzzed loudly on the table. He glanced at the screen and froze. Then, without saying a word, he picked it up and walked out of the boardroom. The glass door closed almost all the way, but not quite. The small gap let through the sound of his voice. At first it was just murmurs, but then a few words slipped through, clear enough to make people lift their heads. "What do you mean the owner's watching?" There was a long pause. "That woman." His voice was louder now, full of disbelief and panic. "The cleaner." Chairs creaked as people leaned in. No one dared say a word. More muffled talking followed, and then silence. When Mr. Carter came back in, his whole face had changed. The color was gone, his lips were tight, and his hands shook just slightly. He walked to the front, like he was in a dream. "Meeting's over," he said, voice flat. You can all go. No one moved right away. People looked at each other, confused. Then, before anyone could ask a question, the main office phone on the wall rang, loud and sharp. Mr. Carter jumped. A woman from HR walked over and answered it, her face serious as she listened. After a few seconds, she turned to the room and said calmly, "Mr. Carter, you're requested to stay. Everyone else, please leave the room. Except, Mila." The name hit the air like thunder. Everyone turned toward the door just as it opened, and there stood Mila, holding her cleaning cloth, standing tall, not afraid, not hurt, just ready. Mr. Carter's eyes widened. He stepped back. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew, deep down, that his time at the top was almost over. Mila stepped into the boardroom with slow, steady steps. She was still wearing her gray uniform, still holding a cleaning cloth in one hand, but something about her was different now, not in how she looked, but in how she stood. Calm, confident, like she belonged there more than anyone else. The room was silent. All eyes were on her. A voice crackled through the speakerphone on the conference table. It was deep, calm, and clearly someone important. "Good afternoon, everyone," the voice began. "This is Mr. Langford, Senior Executive and Chairman of the Board. I believe there's some confusion that needs to be cleared up." Mr. Carter swallowed hard, but said nothing. "Mila," the voice continued, "is not just a cleaner. She is one of the company's original silent partners, and a key stakeholder. She owns nearly 20% of this business." Gasps filled the room. People looked at each other, stunned. One woman even dropped her pen. "She has chosen to remain behind the scenes for years," Mr. Langford went on, "but recently, she decided to return and see the company from the ground level. She asked not to be introduced by her title, but to work quietly among you. She wanted to observe how people are treated, not by how high they rank, but by how kind they are." Mr. Carter stepped backward, bumping into a chair. His face was beet red, and sweat gathered at his collar. "Mila's goal," Mr. Langford said, "was to make sure this company still followed the values we claim to live by: respect, humility and integrity." Now Mila finally spoke. Her voice was soft but strong. "I've seen a lot in the past few weeks," she said, looking around the room. "Most of you were kind, even when you didn't think I was anyone important. But some treated me like I was invisible." She turned toward Mr. Carter. "And some used their position to make others feel small." Mr. Carter opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked around the room, searching for support, but found none. Mila gave a small nod, then looked back at the speakerphone. "I think the board has seen enough," she said. Mr. Langford's voice returned. "We agree, Mr. Carter. Your behavior today and in the past weeks is unacceptable. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Security will escort you from the building." Gasps turned to whispers. Mr. Carter's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious." But no one was laughing now. Mila stood silently as two security officers entered the room. The same man who had once told her to know her place was now being shown the door, and learning exactly what her place really was. As the security guards stepped forward, the room stayed frozen. Mr. Carter's face was a mess of panic and disbelief. He looked at Mila, trying to find the right words, but she spoke first. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. "Is this how you treat people you think are below you?" Mr. Carter's mouth opened and closed. "Mila, I didn't know. If I had known who you were." The voice from the speakerphone interrupted sharply. "That's the problem, Mr. Carter. Respect shouldn't depend on someone's title. It should be given to everyone." Mr. Carter turned pale. "Please, I can explain." But the guards were already at his side. "You've had your chance," Mr. Langford said firmly. With no more words left, Mr. Carter was led toward the door. His fancy shoes echoed on the floor, but no one looked at him with pity. No one tried to stop it. The man who once held all the power now had none. As the door closed behind him, silence filled the room. Then slowly, one person began to clap, then another, and another. Soon the boardroom was filled with soft applause, not just for what had happened, but for the woman who had quietly changed everything. When the room finally quieted, Mila looked around at the faces watching her, some still stunned, others smiling. She didn't seem angry, she just looked peaceful. I never wanted to scare anyone, she said gently. I only wanted to remind people of something simple. She paused, her eyes soft. Respect doesn't come from a title, or a corner office, or the clothes you wear. It comes from how you treat people, especially the ones you think aren't watching. There were a few nods, even a couple of teary eyes. I'll still be around, she added with a small smile. Sometimes you'll see me in meetings, sometimes I might just be walking the halls, or maybe even sweeping them again. Who knows? A few people chuckled. It was the kind of laugh that came from relief and understanding. But next time, Mila said, maybe look twice before you judge someone. From that day on, everything in the office felt different. People slowed down. They held doors open. They said thank you more. New hires were greeted kindly, and no one ignored the cleaning staff anymore. Mila didn't walk around with a badge, or sit behind a big desk. She didn't need to. She became something more than a boss. She became a symbol, a quiet legend. And in that building full of titles and pay grades, people finally understood the most powerful person might not always be the one in the spotlight, but the one who walks with humility and sees everyone with equal eyes. The office eventually returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed for good. People still worked hard, met deadlines, and chased success, but now, they did it with a little more kindness, all because of one woman who chose to stay quiet until it mattered most. Mila reminded everyone of a truth often forgotten in busy places. Kindness and humility aren't weaknesses, they're strengths. They leave deeper marks than titles or promotions ever could. You never know who's watching, or who they really are. The person you ignore today might be the one who signs your paycheck tomorrow, and the one you treat with respect, no matter their role, might just change your life. So the next time someone seems beneath you, look again. Stand up against disrespect. Even when it's easier to stay quiet, speak gently, but speak, because doing the right thing never goes unnoticed. 4